communities.
Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven, WNHH-FM, New Haven's home and Hamden's home for community radio, and you'll see why we mentioned both in a second. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. And there's two women who have been making our community tick so long that we're not even going to talk about how long it's been. We got Robin Porter, State Representative, and family therapist Keturah Bryant from Newhallvlle-Hamden, Stronger Together. We're going to talk about something that's been in the news about the fate of a site that was going to be a methadone center, but we're also going to talk more broadly about Hamden, Newhallville, Stronger Together, and meeting some of the bigger challenges of our time. State Representative Porter, Keturah Bryant, so great to see you today. Thanks for so much for coming into WNHH-FM.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having us, Paul.
Great. And Robin, I always do remind you if you can get real close to the mic, like you're almost touching it. Thanks. Want to hear you loud.
Kiss the mic.
Yeah, almost close. Yeah, you got it. That was perfect. So if you guys can bring me up to date, is it accurate to say that even though there's always been cross-border organizing with neighbors from Newhallville and Hamden, it's sort of that artificial line on a map when you go on both sides of the same street and you're in two different towns, you're one community. The group, Newhallvlle-Hamden Strong Together, that came out of the plan to put the APT clinic, methadone clinic, correct?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
And it's got you folks working together.
Absolutely. And it really came out of a article that was in the Independent. And that is how the community became aware of the intent and the purchase of this building on Dixwell Avenue.
And just to tell you a little secret, just between us, that's why we do the Independent. We hope to give the community information so you can run with it however you think is best to run with it.
Yeah.
So just let our listeners know what we're talking about. There used to be a charter school that closed on Dixwell Avenue, right near the Hamden border in New Haven, Cherry Ann Street, 794 Dixwell. And long ago, it was a Catholic school. It always had a role as a school. And then without telling the community, city leaders and the APT Foundation were planning to put a methadone clinic there, which isn't like putting a gun factory, like they wanted to help people, right? So but they didn't talk to the community, which had a lot of concerns given what their other facilities are like, especially on Congress Avenue. So when the community found out that the plan was to put a methadone clinic right on the border of a family neighborhood, main drag, this group formed, Newhallvlle-Hamden Stronger Together, has been fighting it. Now APT Foundation is looking for a different place to put it. There's another group that wants to put something there instead. And I want to break all that down. So APT bought the property, $2.5 million in December, all ready to go. Then you folks stepped out and State Representative Porter, obviously you're an important player in that. You were saying, well, there are going to be regulatory approvals. I'm not ready to say yes to this. Why did you folks organize against this, and what is the status of that fight?
Well, the primary reason that we organized regarding placing such an entity in the middle of a densely populated residential community where there are multiple schools, children go to catch the bus in front of that, on that corner of Elizabeth and Dixwell, which is one of the other sides of this building. And given the historical impact that the APT Foundation, other clinics have had on communities, it devastates the community.
And we can talk about the Congress Avenue APT Clinic, where there have been shootings, a lot of drug activity right in front of the place. It's a block from a school. It's been really a hard thing for that neighborhood.
Right. And you can't separate that from the impact it's had on its One Longworth setting, which is in a medical building. It's in an
You and I used to work
building.
in that building, remember?
Yes,
I used to see you going in.
Absolutely.
So what was been the impact there? Because I know it is kind of buffered from the neighborhood. The back of that building borders a neighborhood, but you kind of have to go up past the fence and everything.
Why just the impact on the community within the building? There was a daycare center in there, and they
Georgia
had,
Goldblum's. She moved it, right? Yeah.
Right. They had initially the building manager had to, or the owner had to do a different entrance for the daycare because the families didn't feel safe. They were feeling harassed by that population. And then we have the elderly services was on the first floor of that building. They too were complaining, saying that, they were being solicited. They did not feel safe. They're being threatened. So even in the context of an appropriate setting, we have these kind of complaints, these kind of human issues.
So you folks did a petition drive. You had rallies. You called your lawmakers, one of whom is sitting right here, Robin Porter. So what was the reaction? Did it feel like the thing was DOA, dead on arrival, once you folks found out, or where's it stand now, Robin?
Say that again, because I didn't catch.
What's the status? Is the methadone clinic possibly still coming, or are you guys trying to find another location for them? The city's trying to find a location for them?
Well, life is unpredictable, but I would say that we are hoping and fervently praying that the App Foundation has heard what the community has to say about this, and they will take heed, because, as Couture was stating, there are real valid reasons why this is not the location for this type of business, right? And it is a business. They are helping people, and these people deserve to be helped. We are not anti, help. I have family members and friends that need this kind of help. Some are getting it and some are not. So I think it goes back to what's best for everyone, and when we talk about sacrifices, they have to be shared sacrifices. And for this community, our Newhallvlle-Hamden strong community, we have always been the ones making those sacrifices. It has never been any equity in that. And what we are saying as a community, and what I am saying as a lawmaker, is that, there has to be communication. You don't just
well, that was
get
incredible.
To come
that was weird, because even if it could have worked,
yeah.
It's not going to work if you spring it on people, and
Right.
you're not going to be, because if communication can be essential to making it work in terms of once they're up. So what was it like to find out that they hadn't picked up the phone and told you? I mean, the mayor knew about
Well,
it.
I was very appalled, offended, dismayed, disheartened. I mean, I can go on. And, the initial call to the mayor was exactly that. Not only am I a resident and a community stakeholder, I'm an elected official. I represent this district at the State House.
The mayor said he had told APT to contact politicians, and they contacted someone who wasn't there anymore.
Right. They reached out to Alder Clyburn, who was not
The Alder
seated.
anymore.
Right. And that was the end of that. And I think when you're trying to reach someone, especially around something as significant and impactful as a move like this, you reach out to the entire delegation.
And who's you? Does it mean City Hall? If they know about it, or who's responsible?
I believe that City Hall, yes, had a part to play in that, as far as making sure that information went out. And I think as a courtesy, even though Mayor Ellicott directed App Foundation to reach out to the elected officials, where was the courtesy in him doing so himself?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just from one elected official to another. Like, if I know something's going on in someone's district, if I get contacted by someone who lives in, another district, my first question is always, have you reached out to your state representative or your state senator? Because that's where it should start, And I'm into helping everyone. But I just want to go back to something that Couture was talking about, the impact that it has had, because people are trying to make a difference between what's going on Congress Avenue versus what happens at Long Wharf. And we have had and heard so many stories. And the one that resonated with me was, the daycare there, the children. I always say out of the mouth of babes. The children, when they were coming in, there were 2 clinics over there. One was App Foundation, one wasn't. And the children would identify the differences in what they were seeing, how they processed it and verbalized it was, oh, that's the clinic for the hood. Oh, that's the clinic for the suburbs. So, I mean, to me, what that said was astounding.
That is interesting, because on Congress Avenue, a lot of the criminal activity involves people from the suburbs who come to APT.
Exactly.
Kind of interesting.
And I think that's really one of the other primary issues, is that if you are, one of the statements that was made at a gathering at the when we had the radio or the Zoom meeting with the App Foundation, is that they recognize that there's a drought between New Haven and New London for medicated assisted treatment. So my thing is, well, if there's a drought between New Haven and New London, and
Brantford.
looking statistically
East Haven.
at your from DEMAS about the population that you are serving,
Department of Mental Health Services.
that it does not reflect the community in which you want to sit. So therefore, perhaps you may need to want to look at providing services within that drought between New Haven and New London.
I know this was so red hot at first. The community rose up, And we had this quick response where APT said, we're going to try to find another place, but they were still saying, if we can find another place. And meanwhile, this other group stepped in and got $2 million from the state, Reverend Boise Kimber with the Clifford Beers Clinic, to say, well, we'll buy the building and we'll put in a resilience academy, like before and after school care for kids and programs for their parents when they struggle with mental health. I think the goal is long-term also put a charter school in there. But what did you think about this alternative plan? They did come to you to talk to you. What did you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the community, we're open to other suggestions that will enhance the community. One of the things that Clifford Beers and Reverend Kimber and that entity was coming to us and saying, yes, we want the resilience school, and basically what that would entail is like dealing specifically with trauma in communities, trauma with children.
Which is something you know a lot about. We'll talk a little about that later in
Right.
this hour, Keturah.
Right, but we need that.
So are you in favor of this proposal?
Yes, I would be.
How about you, Reverend?
I have
Porter?
not heard as much about this proposal as Keturah has. So what I will say is that from what she's stating currently, I am most definitely interested in anything that will uplift our community and deal with the urban trauma. You know?
And we're talking about a proposal to bring an App Foundation methadone clinic to the heart of the Dixwell Avenue, Newhallville-Hamden line that is on hold now because of neighbors who got together across town lines and spoke up and said it's not the right thing for our neighborhood. State Representative Robin Porter and Keturah Bryant, they are members of Newhallville-Hamden, Stronger Together. We're talking about that on Dateline New Haven. Rhonda Caldwell is also involved from the Hampton Sign wrote in. Numerous conversations should have been had before this app property purchase was even considered. Every elected official should have reached out. So is it fair to say that the group is saying to app, take the money, sell the building to these folks and put in a resilience academy? Is that sort of where it stands?
Well, I think that they just need to decide where they want to go. They need
Right.
to find a place for them to go. And it'll be up to the community once we, if we get multiple proposals for that site, then it would be up to the community then to vet each and every one of those proposals to see how will it impact.
What about housing?
Well, we are
That school
open.
would make a nice, what do you think, Robin? I mean, unless no one wants to build it.
Well,
And you see, I'm cut behind Keturah because I'm like, not to say that housing isn't needed. It most certainly is. I think when we talk about housing, we need to talk about real affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another thing that folks like to throw around, like diversity, affordable housing, and it's never affordable because it actually disperses the community that was rooted and grounded in the village outside the village, right? No longer can they afford this affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we really need to be concentrating on at this point, especially with what's happening nationally, is the trauma. And I want to be specific. It's urban trauma. It is not the same kind of trauma that other folks, experience that don't live in urban centers. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to really make an assessment around that and go back to what are the goals and the expected outcomes. And they should always be about what is going to uplift this community and give us the resources and the funding that we don't currently get in order to make it happen. Because we look at the crime, highest crime rate in the city, right? And if we're really talking about eradicating crime, Paul, then we need to be talking about eradicating poverty, right? Making sure that we get away from the substandardization that has happened in Black and brown communities and bring up the standard around education, around the workforce, around training, around housing, right? Like, why do our neighborhoods look the way they look? Why, when I drive around the Ville or Southern Hampden, I am inundated visually with candles and flowers and these monuments that are built and what it
Memorials
means,
to people shot
and killed in our streets. And why is it that these services that are very much needed, why are they not in other communities besides the urban centers?
So trauma resiliency is what you need more than a methadone clinic. We talked about, Keturah brought up how there's this huge gap on the shoreline up to New London with no treatment centers. Robin brought up how people in our own life, people in my life have needed these services. We need to have them. Where should they go?
Well, I think that there are, just as there are appropriate spaces for everything, when you're talking about zoning, and I often give the example of I can purchase, let's say I went to Alston Avenue in New Haven, I purchased 2 houses next to each other. I bought them. I own them. I decide that I'm going to tear them both down, right? And I'm going to put my heavy retail, heavy construction company there instead. There would be a mass, if anybody found out about it, there would be a massive uproar. What do
They
you
would
mean?
find out about it from day one.
Exactly. And then what would be the major statement? That's not an appropriate place for that business. So there's an appropriateness for the business. I've been in treatment and recovery as a professional person all of my adult life. And I understand addiction. I understand mental health. And I understand that there are appropriate places for people to be treated for those types of challenges in their life. But I also understand that there is a culture that happens in treatment facilities. And as they pointed out, this one is for the suburbs or this one is for the hood. I happen to have been an assistant director at the suburban type looking
Where was that?
at Satu, which is at the other end of this corridor.
That's why I used to see you in the
one
morning
lower.
at the workday. Okay.
Exactly. So for me, it was like I understood the culture that we were trying to have for our clients, for our clinic, understanding that when they walked through the door, the major goal was for them to have a quality of life so that they could leave the clinic, test the waters. If they ran into any stress or difficulties, they knew a place, a safe haven for them to come back to get more insight, to get fortified so that they can go back out and lead a positive and productive lifestyle. That was the culture. That was the message. And there were boundaries. We gave time bound, you're trying to go from a chaotic situation. You want to lead a more calm life. And so this is what happens when you are no longer in chaos. There are boundaries. If you want a job, you got to honor time. If you want to be in a relationship, you got to honor human beings. So it's the culture. And I think that I don't want to, most people are focused on the executive director at APT, but that was a board decision. I understand boards of directors, and there are people on that board. It saddened me once I found out that they were on the board, that you actually voted that was a yes, that you could come into our community.
So where should it go? Should it be smaller facilities spread out in more places? Should it be off the beaten path? Because I'm hearing several issues raised, including the different kind of organizations and the different way they ran them in the same building, Couture at One Long Wharf. So is it about that the AMP Foundation should not be running these clinics? Should it be that the people running these clinics should have smaller ones in different places? Like, where should people in Newhallville go? And should people, I think you're agreeing that people who aren't from our area shouldn't be coming into the area.
But I think that there are facilities within every community that can house such a situation. And I would say, yes, let's have smaller clinics. But we know historically, and it's been documented, they just had a big article by a woman that just graduated from Yale that did a whole document. Her whole thesis was about the impact of methadone maintenance clinics on residential neighborhoods.
Right.
She focused on New York and other places.
Yeah, and let's talk about the neighborhoods, right? Because I think when you ask the question, where should it go? I can tell you where it shouldn't go. It shouldn't go in communities that are actually suffering and struggling with the same kind of traumas that are attempting to be treated. Like, to me, putting the App Foundation Methadone Clinic at 794 Dixwell in the heart of a community that is struggling with the same kind of traumas and addictions, and let's add on to that the gun violence and everything else that's going on in this community, it's just not conducive. It's like me being an alcoholic and you're going to tell me, you know what, you got a 1 o'clock treatment appointment at the bar across the street. That's what it is. And
there is a bar pretty almost across the street.
Yeah, right.
Nice bar.
And it is conducive to what happens when folks go through these treatment programs and aren't successful. It is a battle. Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, it is a battle with yourself and what you're trying to come out of. You can't do that without positive reinforcement.
Well, I'm thinking about people. We had an interview on the air, Courtney Luciano, the other day of someone outside the methadone clinic who came from Brantford every day to the Congress Avenue, who is so lured while he's talking to her by the people around her saying, come on around the corner, let's get high. that culture outside the building is tough. And I know APT says, they've tried, but, it's not just people getting shot. It's, I've gone by where I see people just ducking over and getting high and like.
Broad daylight.
Yeah.
Shooting up.
Yeah.
Broad daylight. Sitting
Passing
out there
out.
on the
So I'm
stoop.
trying to think where to go. When I asked whether it should be off the beaten path, Couture brought out that if it's still an organization that isn't running it well and there are other organizations in that building, it can be tough. So where would you, is the argument that we have enough in New Haven now? So it's not like we need another one in Newhallville or the Hamden line, as well as who runs it? Like where do you want to see them? Do you want to see them spread out in the shoreline more, Cheshire?
Well, they need those individuals having to travel that
Yeah.
far into New. Yes, absolutely.
And then there's also type of treatment. So in Waterbury, people would come here because they couldn't, was it a urine issue? If you had dirty urine, you couldn't get anywhere but APT. And APT had reasons for that. They say you want to keep the people on the program, right?
However, there has to be some level of personal responsibility
Yeah.
from a treater to motivate those individuals to have a desire to remain in good standing if they choose to have treatment. We give people choices every day. I have to be here. No, you don't. You don't have to be here. You can continue to do what you're doing. But if you choose to be here, this is what's
There are
the
rules.
expectation.
There are boundaries.
Where else in life isn't there?
And then some people suggested let doctors prescribe and administer the methadone. There are concerns about that, about how you regulate it so it's not abused. And doctors make a lot of money by just keeping
Doctors
people
already
hooked.
do that.
Doctors,
they
they
already
can
do that.
prescribe
Like, do we
Suboxone
need methadone clinics?
Well, perhaps
I mean, I know
not.
the group sessions
I
are
think,
important.
But yes, I'm just saying that a physician is not going to give you treatment. They're going to give you medication. People need treatment. Medication is really the
Our
last
society has
thing.
moved so much toward medication instead of talk therapy and toward you know what I mean? Because it's like cheaper for the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies make their profits. But I don't know that it's really helping people move to independent lives.
No, it
with
isn't.
that emphasis.
Physicians aren't treaters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can come. I treated impaired healthcare professionals for 30 years. These are individuals that were dealing with opiate addiction,
And
alcoholism.
so they had jobs where there was this like lure right there.
Well, they had they had access, and so in order for them to either try to get reinstated or for them to begin their recovery process, they had to come to. They chose to come to treatment because nobody has to come to treatment. You choose to. You have to.
And one thing I've
understand
noticed
that's a
people in
choice.
my life, including family who've struggled with addiction, is sometimes you're enabling them when they're not ready. If they're going to play you too, to get around rules and not take
Absolutely.
responsibility in it. There is this moment. It's hard to tell from the outside, though. You do this for a living, so you must be pretty good at it. I was pretty bad at it, trying to figure out when somebody's really in the game and ready to take responsibility and when you're just being played and enabling an addiction.
Well, it's clear to you that you're being played. You may not want to accept the fact that you're being played, but you know it. You know, that's not a secret because their behavior is very parallel to what it's always been. And you say, well, why did you use this time? You know. But you know that you're being played. We all know that. We know we're being played by a 5-year-old.
And Newhallville knew it was being played by the App Foundation, which is subject to today's episode of Dateline New Haven and Hamden with Robin Porter, Katara Bryant, Newhallville-Hamden, stronger together. Now, whenever we have a controversy like this in the community and the community organizes and rise up, there's always an upside, which is that it gets neighbors out with each other to say what they want to have happen in their community,
That's right.
talk to each other, and assert themselves, because good things don't happen in communities unless the communities demand it, right?
That's right.
Tell me about that. What happened in these last few months of organizing? You know, we've seen Robin out there with the petitions, with her neighbors knocking on the doors. You know, you had not just Zoom meetings, but in-person meetings and rallies. You had people coming with ideas for what they want to put there. What has this meant for Newhallville, meaning the Newhallville neighborhood of New Haven, and then right over that invisible boundary line, the Hamden Newhall neighborhood? What has this meant for community?
I see it as a resurgence of the village. You know, God has been speaking that into my spirit for many years. Back to the basics.
And you have
back to
that
being a
district, too. You
village.
represent both of them in the state legislature.
Absolutely. And it is about building community. It's about building social cohesion. It's about reinstating the love that we have for one another and getting recentered not just in who we are as individuals, but who we are as a community, as a village, as a whole, as a collective, because that's where the real power is. It's easy to pluck off 2 or 3 folks, but you're not plucking off 100 or 200 so easily. So I think it has been a spiritual awakening in a lot of ways for this community around what it is that we need to be doing together and how it is we need to come together to get that done. So when we did Newhallvlle-Hamden Strong, that was strong.
I like that name. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's
a
strong or
statement.
stronger together. Is it 2 names for the same
Stronger
group?
together. Stronger together.
Exactly. And I think that we recognize that we are in a drought in that community in Newhallville for resources. We don't have a grocery store that sells fresh fruits and vegetables to our families. We don't have a medical center that we can go to even for emergent care. We don't have a close by fire department. We don't have those services.
That is true. You don't have the fire. You kind of go, is it the Dixwell station?
Dixwell Station.
That's kind of a schlep.
It is.
Well, I'm just saying that but we also recognize what a gem Newhallville is, and that where we sit is a beautiful place to be. We are in walking distance. In my ability, we're in walking distance to downtown New Haven. It's less than a 3-mile walk. We're 3 miles from Hamden Plaza. You can
And
go
I've
over
also,
the hill.
I still think we need the Winfred Rembrandt Museum.
Oh,
He just won a Pulitzer
absolutely.
Prize after his death,
Absolutely.
the amazing leather
That's right.
artist, and
That's
I think we got to bring that there. So what
Yes.
about Newhallville and Hamden together? So the street signs look a little different. Oh, Terry Edwards Roundsview says we definitely don't. We barely have a gas station. Thank you, Terry, for listening in. What about that identity? How fused is that identity? I know when law enforcement works together, because they say, some of the crime that's happened, there's groups on either side of that. I mean, like Chasmos is right at the border. Someone's, coming from one area to another. How together and how not together are those two parts of your area, Robin, that you're representing?
I think they're very together. I mean, so
Absolutely.
much together that I can't tell the difference between my New Haven and Hamden supporters, right? My constituency is wholesome. That's what I'll say. And it truly is reflective of the village. And when this all came about, like, Sherlyn Poindexter, Rhonda Caldwell, there were Justin Farmer.
And of course, all
elected
these people-
officials from Hamden. I mean, everyone came together and said, you know what? If one of you are hurting, we're all hurting.
And when you see some of those people like Rhonda or Justin, some days you see them on the Hamden line doing something. The other days you see them in the New Haven
That's
line
right.
saying something. And it is kind
Because
of...
we are one.
Yeah.
We are one and we are unified. And I think that's really important. And I think that App Foundation, yes, it came at a time that was, we were already struggling as a community with the pandemic. And it really did feel like an all-out attack, right? Because of the lack of communication. But what they did was spur something in us that's always been there. And they have helped to bring this community back together in a way that is going to be so critical to post-pandemic. So
Absolutely.
for 1 or 2 reasons, I will thank them, for for those reasons, like really bringing us together in a way that was long overdue. Sometimes you just need something to fight for, and this was that thing to fight for that brought us together. And I believe that this will extend way past the App Foundation. We're already talking about other issues in the community that we need to deal with this coalition, and also expanding the bench of this coalition.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's
the hill,
awesome.
the hill came. Let's not forget the hill.
Oh, yeah.
The hill came out with strong support
Yes,
because
they
of
did.
their experience.
Well, that's something that was interesting to me, too. You folks from Newhallville-Hamden together, you went to the community management teams. And Newhallville's always had one of the all-star community management teams. I know you guys fight within the team, but every team fights. But you guys show up and you get a lot done. You're awesome. And you went to other community management teams around the city, and they all said, yes, we're with you.
Yes, they did.
They supported you. They didn't pit neighborhood against neighborhood, which I thought was kind of inspiring. So, Robin Porter, that was so interesting what you said, that you think this coalition is going to outlive the fight about the App Foundation, because I do think you won that fight. It's not over yet, and if you give up, maybe you lose, but you're not going to lose that one.
Not giving up.
But
Not giving
But
up.
what do you got your eye on now? You talked about life coming out of the pandemic. What kind of issues is this coalition going to be able to take on now?
I think one of the major coalitions is what we've been harping on, the trauma that has been exacerbated by this pandemic, and what the manifestations of that trauma currently is. And I think we can be most candidly when we say we do have to address the gun violence. We have to address what's going on in our communities with our youth, with our children, and even with the adults, because there is an assumption that, it's the youth. And yes, it is the youth, but it's not only the youth. And desperate times call for desperate measures, and we need to make sure that we're getting resources into this community, into all communities that look like ours, so that there are options. People have choices that that aren't conducive to crime.
What kind of resources do you want to see come in? We talked about trauma health, so that's why Katura said she supports this plan, and while you don't know specific about this plan, you seem to support the concept of trauma-informed care and programs. Any other thoughts on your radar about what you'd like to see this coalition bring to the area?
Well, we'd like for it to bring an industry to this area. We want to see, like I said, we need a viable supermarket. We need a viable wellness healthcare facility. We need wellness experiences. We need to begin to teach our community how to manage our stress. We recognize that stress is a natural part of living, but we also know that you can be taught to manage your stress. And
you do that for a living, right? You said as a family therapist, you've developed a whole program, you've written a couple books about how to deal with loss, and not just loss of a loved one, but loss of housing, loss of opportunity, job, correct?
That's correct.
Tell us a little about that. What's it going to take? What do people need to learn in our community about dealing with loss? Because you said coming out of the pandemic, Robin, you're talking about loss.
Well, I have a curriculum called the Zola Experience.
Can you spell that?
Zola. Zola. Zola is a West African word that means to love.
Isn't that funny? I was thinking of Emile Zola, the novelist. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so, because I tell you, I've been working in the recovery community for a very, very long time. But, our community is struggling from historical trauma. We have not had even an opportunity to deal with the historical trauma of enslavement, of captivity, of being of colonizers coming to take us from our homeland. We have not had an opportunity to breathe. We need to develop those spaces where we can breathe, and then we can build upon that in a more intense kind of way to understand the historical trauma, which is some of the work that Enola Air does with the Community Healing Network, which I'm a part of that as well. But that really centers a lot around understanding the historical context of how we got here. The Zola experience is like at the very base of giving you voice to your experience, whether it was today, yesterday, or the first time that you were assaulted because of your fact that you have a melanin in your skin. So the Zola experience begins there. It lends voice to the human experience of all kinds of losses.
And how do people, if they want to get involved in this, or is there some kind of website or?
Absolutely. You can go to www.thezolaexperience.com, or you can email me directly at thezolaexperience@gmail.com.
Right. I love the idea it's named after love.
I think the other thing too, if you want to talk about what, I'd like to see, and I think I can make it a we'd like to see, is, and kudos to the Q House. They really have it going on over there. But I do believe that every one of our communities should have a community center. And I reflect back on when I was young.
And used to have the Newhallville Community Center. It used to be right near the church there in Dixwell.
Well, that was before my time.
That was before my time.
But
too.
I
No, it wasn't.
I did grow up.
Because your time is not before my time, Katura.
I grew up with a community center, so I know the importance of that, right? And how you bring community together. These two over here snickering. Okay, Paul. But yeah, I would say a community center and be able to offer the wraparound services and the supports that would help to bridge the gap in parenting, right? Because we live in a community where most parents, right? And not too long ago, this parent was working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet.
Yeah.
So how do we build and bridge that gap? How do we provide safe spaces and liberating spaces for our children, right? We talk about they're the future. I'm here to tell you, they're the right now. Because if we don't get it right now, we have no future. So we have to make sure that we have spaces where they can be taught trades and, like civics and, home economics and just how to be, and let's talk about the one thing we haven't touched on around, App Foundation and any other thing you want to talk about that they bring to our neighborhoods that they don't take to other neighborhoods. There is this sense of dehumanization. And I think that we have to bring humanity back to the equation. And I say bring it back, but it's never really been a part of the equation for Black people, right? There's this myth that, when we talk about healthcare and things of that nature, right? People really believe we have a high tolerance of pain, which I do, but I'm that's not every Black person, right?
There are all the studies about how doctors think there's less tolerance of pain, you don't get the help you need.
Yeah, like our skin is thicker. There's all this crazy stuff that I hear people say. And what's sad is I've had medical professionals, doctors with PhDs tell me that this is how they're taught Western medicine. So it is it's structural racism. So I think that's the other thing we need to talk about when we talk about what do we want to see for our communities. We want to be liberated. We want to be set free for real. It sounds good.
Right. And I think that to bring in more holistic interventions for our community, because we're not really interested in a lot of
Western
pills
medicine.
or Western medicine because we don't trust it. There's no reason for us to trust it.
But you do have us on the acupuncture path.
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to find, there were a bunch, I've been trying to keep track of some of the comments, and unfortunately they got scrolled down here from Terry Edwards Round. Black and Brown United, I'm sorry I just lost your comment, but about plunking a building, which you thought was very Yale, into the empty space. Terry Edwards Round, who says, what are we doing about the gentrification coming down from Winchester Avenue and slowly pushing past Science Park? There's a disconnect with the youth and the elders community, and that's right on point because a big new investment in Science Park, a bunch of new housing developments, upscale, going around, which I'm not saying pro, I'm just saying that's happening. And with Science Park's growth, that is going to be a big question in Hamden and Newhallville. Rhonda Carlos says Hamden has the Keefe Center, which is 100 years old, with leaking roofs and a blighted town property, sitting in the middle of Newhallville for 20 years. No youth rec center. Terrible. One thing that's beautiful, I think, about what you're talking about, Katara Bryant and Robin Porter, is how this, what you saw as an existential challenge of the Appalachian Method Clinic, something you didn't want in your neighborhood, brought all these people together across town line to think about what you do want in your neighborhood and what makes your neighborhood strong. And I wonder if we could reflect briefly on two instances where the neighborhood did want something, and you always want to try a lot of ideas. Some work, don't work. One didn't work. One did work. So at the old Bassett Street Social Services, State Social Services office, it's been empty. The city under the Hart administration came together, which I think a plan everybody loved, which was to have it be worker-owned cooperative, supply the hospitals. I forget what the business was going to be. It wasn't mattresses, was it?
Laundry.
It was laundry, right? Which was a really great business plan. And have to be part of a community center as well in the neighborhood. The buildings are sitting there in the neighborhood in terms of destiny. It didn't happen. And why was that?
That's a good question.
Well, no, I understand that. I don't know. They need to tell me if I'm wrong. But from what I have understood is that there's a number of safety issues regarding that building.
That's a tough old building. I could see it falling apart in your head right in the middle of jumping rope or something.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
so like my theory on this one always was that everybody's well-intentioned. They had a really cool idea, and not every idea works.
Right. I think they just need to raise the building and brownfield it because that was one of the issues for the state workers was that there was a high incident of cancer.
I remember that,
within that building and people that had worked in that building for years. So I think I want the property, perhaps if they can raise it and build us a spanking brand new community center, we would love that.
Hello.
And then something that's happened great right a block away was what we used to call the mud hole, right? Immortalized as the place where there's drug dealing, date night shooting, all that stuff, right? In the crossroads with Shelton and West Hazel. And it is heaven, right? So,
we ain't going to say it's heaven.
Well, what I mean is they've turned it
better.
into this place where anytime I go by there,
Yes.
there's somebody young doing something cool. Or Doreen has her greenhouse up where she's teaching kids how to grow stuff. They're teaching them, organizing the bike rides and the walks, health walks on the trail. There's this crossroads there in Newhallville that has been transformed. It's not a building. It's the opposite of a building.
That's right.
It's an outdoor space that's been claimed.
Yes.
That used to be the prom area of the neighborhood is now the gem of the neighborhood. What do we take from that?
We're trying to maintain that. We want that to grow and flourish. And we know that 3 blocks from that haven would be this methadone program that is going to bring those kind of elements that it will no longer be safe for our children to go up, ride bikes up and down the Farmington Canal. It won't be safe for the elderly to walk from Daisy Street to Dixwell Avenue businesses. It won't be a haven that we want it to be. And so we're just saying that, you know, there's other methadone programs in the city of New Haven, and we don't hear anything about them.
And I think the other thing is, we really need to listen to the people. The people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, but oftentimes furthest from the power.
Yes.
So as someone with power, I feel it really is my responsibility to use that power to empower the people that have trusted me, right, to be in that building and to be an authentic voice. And what I hear in the community in the way of authenticity is that, we need to be taken care of first. Like we're always put on life support at the cost of saving someone else's life.
And it's just combinations coming in. Lauren Carter grew from the grassroots. I think that part of the lesson here might be, as you said, listen to the community, and then if there's outside help, like you're at the legislature getting money, you're talking about going to City Hall, or actually Doreen doesn't even live in there because he works at the Lauren Carter. Maybe it's people as a community embracing what the neighborhood wants.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And having the ideas grow organically.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
just
the
hear us, see us, validate us. We are human beings. We have the same wants, needs, and desires as the family that lives in any other part of this city. We have the same wants and desires of people that live in Westville or in East Rock. We have the same wants and desires for our children. We want to be able to have a outdoor sitting space like they do on Fountain and Whaley. It's a beautiful space
without being
fear.
shy.
Exactly.
Because that really is what it is right now.
And you want to see the Lauren Carter as that outdoor space? I'm not saying it should be the only one. I mean, you want them every few blocks.
It's a manifestation of that, and in part because it's intersectional and it's very diverse.
And it's actually an intersection. It's
it
a three-way
is.
intersection.
It actually is.
And then, I love the way Jeanette Sykes couldn't make it today. I love the way just ad hoc that Newhallville and Newhall together organized wonderful community building efforts. Around Christmas when they had everybody dress up their houses and the judges went around to
so
judge.
Cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
I just think it's the best happening neighborhood.
Yes.
But it's not, it's the things that neighborhoods do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I want people to understand is that, like I say, we are a community. We are a neighborhood. And we just want the opportunity to be.
To thrive.
To thrive.
If you want to talk
That's
about
right.
thriving, communities can't thrive unless families are thriving. Mm-hmm. So we have to meet people where they are. And we have to make sure, once again, we're listening to them. That we're not just giving them lip service. Mm-hmm. That when they're telling us what they need, we lend credence to that. And we move on that, And Rhonda brought up, the Keith Center. 1.2 million or so came down. We were able to get me and the delegation for the Keith Center. Now, there are thoughts around what should happen with that Keith Center. So it is going to be in my interest and in the interest of the people that I represent to see how the town responds to that.
So what do people want? What do people want to have happen?
We want to see the community center expanded. We want to see it updated. We want to see it come, into today's technology, and be just as, competitive as what we see at the Q House. Mm-hmm. We need to have those same resources accessible to each and every community.
So what's the next step that going to be? Are they going to ask Representative Porter to get us some money from the state at the bond commission? Or I know everyone's leaning on you every day for money for the bond commission.
Yes, that is a heavy lean,
That is, because there isn't money for everybody.
It's not, but I think that this is the other thing, right? We have to help the people who need the help. Yeah. We cannot continue to hold towns harmless who have not been harmed. Why are you getting this money? Why are we holding you harmless? Why are we just allowing you to have 100 to 200% of educational cost sharing is what I'm thinking right now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When we have New Haven and Hamden and other towns that aren't getting fully funded. Like, that doesn't make sense. And when I say just make it make sense, I think when we start doing the thing that makes sense, when we start doing the thing that is right, we get away from all this other political stuff that comes into play. And I think a lot of times that kind of kills what should be done and the strength and the urgency at which it should be done, because the things we're talking about, there's a sense of urgency in our community that is not being responded to.
So Rhonda Caldwell gives a thumbs up to you, Rob, and says yes to the bond commission. And Blackberry 9 Action had written shoving another building in the middle of disenfranchised area, very Yale-esque. So before I let you go, I want to thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank
Robin
you.
Porter, Bryant, what's next for Newhallville United, Newhallville-Hamden Stronger Together. And for each of you, what's on your next to-do list?
So we are still collecting petitions. You do not have to live in Newhallville. You can live in anywhere because we recognize that this is a City of New Haven issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the management teams throughout the city agree. So we need petitions. You can do the petition electronically on the Facebook page of Newhaven-Hamden Strong.
Okay.
We're going to be having more rallies. We're going to be having community gatherings.
Yes.
Just
There you
to
go.
celebrate
Yes.
the fact that it's summer and we can
Yes.
be outside
All right.
and we can celebrate the community in which we live.
That
All
is what I
right.
would
And
add.
Robin Porter.
Yes, definitely. You know, the weather's getting warm, and we know what happens in our neighborhoods when the weather gets warm. So I would like to see all of us out and about, all of us, you know, getting together, congregating, socializing, and building that kind of social cohesion that will get rid of the negative elements in the community. That's really what I want to see. And I want to see more engagement with the youth and with our elders, you know, and how we can better serve them responsibly in their time of need, not just when, you know, it's that time of year.
Well, I feel more inspired than I did an hour ago.
Well,
I'm
this
glad
is a
to hear
I
it.
beautiful
always
thing.
love to hear what Katura Bryant and Robin Porter are up to. And you're up to a lot of good stuff in Newhallville. And you took lemons and you made lemonade.
Yes.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much.
Newhallville-Hamden Stronger Together. Keep up the fight. And thanks for letting us know what's going on here at Dateline New Haven and Dateline
Thank you for having
Hamden.
us, Paul.
Thank
So I
you.
want to thank State Rep Robin Porter, Katura Bryant, Newhallville-Hamden Stronger Together. Thanks, everyone, for the great comments you were putting in. I even figured out in the end how to make sure I got to read them. I want to thank Harry Droz, the best station manager in the business.
Yes.
And we're
Big
going to
ups
take
to
it out.
Harry
We're going to take it out with
and
a-
his wifey.
Yep. And we're going to take it out with a cross-border Newhallville-Hamden stellar act, the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free
My
from their
God.
CD, A Plea for Peace.
I wish I knew.
That's that. You said that 4 years ago when you came on the show. I played the same song. And you're still saying
Yes. Free in spirit.
it. All
But I
right.
want to be free everywhere else.
That's right.
All right. Amen. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven and Hamden's home for community radio.